how much revenue are you totally on an average you're making out of this? And
So
we're
our house
talking
is
gross
not
revenue.
full yet, and we are only half full.
Mhm.
And our revenue for the year with half full is maybe like 560,000.
And that's with three uh, consumers, three
Yeah.
patients.
Hmm.
Okay. Now let's talk the operation side now. Now we know the revenue, we know the revenue centers, we know understand the revenue model here, but let's get into the operation side of it and the expense side of it, right? What kind of staff do you need to if you were fully, fully booked, or even right now with half booked, what kind of staff do you have today?
My staff now is the same amount of staff I would need if I was fully booked. So my
That's what I
staffing cost
figured.
is at its max right now. I have LPNs and CNAs. So two bodies on shift, and there are two shifts per day. You have your day shift and your night shift, and each person works like 3 12-hour shifts a week. So it's 24 hours you have to have someone scheduled in that home. I think we're probably around about 350,000 a year in staffing costs alone. So the staff is going to be your biggest expense, but it doesn't continue to grow as your consumer base grows. Um, yeah, I'd say per month, roughly about 34,000 a month are the expenses compared to the roughly 70,000 in revenue.
Mhm. So you have two LPN and two CNAs working shifts. So one CNA and one LPN, kind of two bodies,
Mm-hmm. For
and they
the day
work in
shift and
12,
the same at night,
yeah, and they work in 12-hour shifts or eight-hour shifts.
12.
12-hour shifts. What's the salary or hourly rate for LPN and CNA?
Depends on your market.
Yeah, in
What
your
I'm
market.
seeing here is that a range anywhere between 25 and 35 are your LPNs. And for your CNAs, on average, about 20 to 25, and sometimes lower. But the caveat is that the agency, they don't pay that, right? Like the agency is going to pay you $25 an hour, 25 to 27 an hour for an LPN. That's it. So, but your what they want is more like 30 to 35. So you have to add that extra to that nurse's payment because you're not getting the full nurse's salary from Medicaid.
Well, you're not getting, but if you're thinking one consumer,
Right.
one patient, but when you times it three, then of course they are paying you more than what you're spending.
Right.
Right. Okay. And how reliable is, every industry, like, Airbnb, right? Airbnb, we have cleaners. And most of the time, if you're working with a set of cleaners, um, you know where I'm going. So if you're working with like a smaller company or like a team of cleaners, there usually somebody will be there, right? But cleaners also had a shelf life. That's what I kind of figured. They have a shelf life of 6 to 8 months or 9 months, and then something happens, something weird happens, and then you just turn around a cleaner. How reliable from a scheduling standpoint or from a shift standpoint is your LPN and CNA staff, and how often do you have to kind of be like, oh man, this guy is not coming at this 11th hour, right? And you have this shift starting. So, because it's different level of professionalism, I would believe.
What everybody's experience is going to vary. If you ask someone else, they're going to tell you it's the worst thing ever. People call out constantly and they can't keep nurses on staff. That hasn't been my experience. The same staff that we hired the first month that we started, 80% of them are still there
Okay.
and they show up for work. You know, if they are planning a trip, we know a month in advance what days they're not going to be able to work. So we don't experience that. But
Now,
I
because
hear a
of
lot of
the,
other homeowners saying that they do quite frequently.
and if that happens at, last minute, like, hey, I cannot be there, but you need to have a nursing staff. So how do you handle that? I mean, it's not like you can
I
be
have an
there, like,
additional, like a supervisor, the supervisor of the nurses. She
uh-huh.
doesn't schedule, she's not scheduled for shifts. But a part of her role is also if there's a call out, then you jump in and fill that. So you're basically on call every day. And if someone can't make it, you'll come in and fill that shift. And I'll say that might happen maybe once or twice every 3 months,
Hmm.
if even. And but usually it's planned in advance.
Okay. And is she on or he or she is on just on a contracting side, or is that a full-time body that you have that
Yeah, she's full time.
she's full-time? Okay. So your staff looks like two CNAs, two LPNs, and one supervisor.
Per day, which is a total of five LPNs, five CNAs, and a supervisor.
No, five LPNs? I
Each
thought it was two.
individual only works 3 days a week. So, and then
Oh,
we
okay.
have like Sunday falls out. So I have two LPNs that are working weekdays and one LPN that does Sunday. And then at night, there are two more LPNs that are sharing the full night shift.
Okay. All right. And from a what are your other expenses? Any, like you were talking about diapers and stuff like that. So what kind of, or is it provided by the agencies?
It's provided by the insurance for the individual and by the agency, yes.
And do they just ship it to you, or you kind of
Mhm.
bill it
They just ship it every month, standing order.
standing order? Okay. Now that's a good business model to be in.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, this is great. I mean, I have heard stories about, but then I have the story that I have heard about assisted living is more about in the sense of you need to put in a sprinkler system and, weird. End of the day, every time I have talked to somebody about assisted living, it has just grown into like a bigger project
It is
and
true
smaller.
though. They are telling you the truth because for them, their agency and their client population, those are the requirements.
Those are the requirements. Great. So what's next for you? So you are transitioning from Airbnbs to assisted livings,
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine.
I'm. This is probably my primary focus for like the next 3 years or so, just building us out, filling up the properties, and then I'd like to take the income from this business to invest back into real estate, get some commercial assets, maybe buy a couple businesses, and just kind of further diversify.
Mhm. And you also mentioned that you have done some new constructions, right?
Hmm.
Like 20 some new constructions.
So, like about 30 minutes outside of Orlando, there's a town called Titusville that's just lower cost, but you're starting to see a little bit of spread going that way. So, that contractor that I worked for, even though I stopped working for him, we became partners. We would do a couple flips together here and there, and he started doing new construction out in that area. Um, and again, I looked; those numbers look good, and I was like, okay, well, I have some money in a 401k that I rolled over to self directed, and so now
Mhm.
I invest in those projects with them.
Yeah. And everything from that is tax free. So that's another benefit when you're doing rollover from self-directed. Awesome. And what's your vision next? So if you are looking at next 3 years is assisted living, is it gonna be heavily on assisted living? And how about
Yeah,
the new construction side or anything else?
for sure. It's heavily on assisted living. Like, it's not. It started out as okay. I'm going to start this business. It'll be a good business. It'll be fine. I'll just build it as big as possible. Once you get involved, it is, and you operate yourself, it is hard not to have a personal attachment to each individual and their families. So it,
Mm,
it's not just a business that you can, well, that I can just scale and build out. It is now a business, like I have kids now. These are my children. This is extended family. It's a responsibility that I have now. And so I want to be able to focus on that primarily so I know that they're getting the best care and service that they can get.
makes sense. And what kind of research, if a new person is kind of getting into the assisted living, or what should they be researching for and what resources? Because assisted living is a topic that's least talked about. Like Airbnbs, you got AirDNA and you kind of go there, and then you got Rabu, and then you got Zillow. So you have like a performer that you come up with, and you're like, okay, this is my mortgage, and and it's usually by the occupancy rate and all that stuff. With assisted living, of course, you got different agencies and different kind of level of care that we were discussing about. But uh, I mean, if somebody's getting started, where do they start their research?
I mean, that's like the $1 million question that nobody has an answer to, quite honestly. Um, I did, I'm sharing as much as I can because when I started this, there wasn't really information for me, right? Like, I still have the same questions. So, our first year of that home, we recorded all of it and put it on YouTube. And you can just see what we were doing, what we're talking about. Um, Quite honestly, there is no real place to start because it's so nuanced. Like a person in Texas is going to be having to do something completely different than a person in Georgia or Florida. I'd say having an example is going to be the easiest way. Like find an assisted living facility that's somewhat the thing that you want to do. What I did, I went and volunteered at one for a couple months just to try to get some line of sight because there's no like resource bank of information that says start here. Um, so find one that you're interested in. You can tour it as if you were considering putting a loved one there. You can volunteer or work there. I think that's going to be the best way to understand what it is and be able to make an informed decision is by being in it. You could also start with picking who you want to serve. Let's say you have a loved one that has a special need and you've always wanted more support and services for them. Well, maybe that's your motivation and you start there. So it's totally up to that individual what they want to do, and what they want to do will dictate what their first step is. So it's really hard to answer that question without knowing what they wanted. So I'll say, based on my experience, if you knew you wanted to provide nursing care to adults with developmental disabilities, you would look up agency for persons with disabilities in your state to find out what agency regulates that. And then from there, you'll understand like what their requirements are to become a provider and be able to get a list of different homes in the area that do that. And then you can further investigate those businesses that already exist to try to gain a better understanding.
Alrighty.